Good evening, dear viewers. This is All 24 Nightly News, broadcasting live from Algiers. I'm your host, Karim Fazakari, and up next are the headlines. Tensions mount as Niamey faces potential military intervention. ECOWAS operation in Niger sparks opposition across borders. And the Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune confirms Algeria's total and categorical rejection of the step. Algerian president denounces idle talk of Zionist entities' recognition of Morocco's alleged sovereignty over Western Sahara. Also ahead, Algeria gains momentum in pursuit of BRICS membership, and President Abdelmadjid Tebboune secures support from key blocs members. Also ahead in our news, Jeddah talks conclude in stalemate on the Ukraine conflict, escalating tensions as Russia announces air-based bombings. Kiev claims downing of missiles and drones meanwhile. Hello again, and thank you for joining us. Anticipation grips Niger's capital as the ECOWAS deadline looms, pressuring the military council in Niamey to reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum. Despite the threat of military intervention, a united public consensus stands firm against any forceful actions on their nation. The details in this report by Islam Said.
Thousands of Nigerians flocked to the capital Niamey, holding rally in support of the military coup in Niger. The pro-coup vigil was also held as a defiance against any military interference by ECOWAS forces.
I'm here to support the military. We are against ECOWAS. We will fight to the end. We do not agree what France is doing against us. We are done with the colonization.
Many supporters of the military administration backed the coup and demanded Niger's sovereignty, blaming foreign forces of stealing the country's riches.
They have stolen our riches, our uranium, our petroleum, everything. It's enough. The youth are fed up. There is no jobs. There is no work. So we are going to find our sovereignty. Put a stop. We've had enough. Foreign forces can't come here. Our soldiers are enough to save us.
It's France that's behind this ECOWAS force that wants to attack us. I think they have noticed that we have the support of Burkina. We have the support of Mali. We have the support of a certain number of partners who are ready to fight if Niger is attacked. This is a declaration of war.
ECOWAS has given Niger's coup leaders until Sunday to free President Mohamed Bazoum and restore the countries to democratic rule. However, the African bloc faces several appeals to resort to a peace solution, and as the situation unfolds, the Nigerian Military Council decided to close the country's airspace for security reasons. No signs of opposition by the population as the military took over the country's rule. The coup in Niger adds another complexity layer to the West African region, whose most population faces poverty, despite rich resources.
And in the same context, Nigeria's Senate rejects President Tinubu's request for military intervention in Niger to reinstate President Mohamed Bazoum. Instead, the parliament urges a political solution to the crisis in Niger, rejecting the use of military force. Tinubu had sought approval to deploy Nigerian forces to combat the coup in Niger.
The Senate considered the contents of the executive communication from Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who also doubles as the chairman of ECOWAS, on his request for support in the implementation of the resolutions of ECOWAS on the political situation in Niger Republic, and resolved as follows. 1. The Senate condemns in totality the military coup that took place recently in the Republic of Niger. 2. The Senate commends President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and other heads of states and governments of ECOWAS for their prompt response.
In the same file still, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune vehemently opposes military intervention in Niger, reaffirming the country's strong stance. He highlighted the potential dangers, citing the destabilizing impact like seen in Libya and Syria.
متطورة وما زالت تمد في السكة الحديدية. بالطبع تهديد مباشر للجزائر. احنا رافضين رفض تام وقطعي بالنسبة للتدخل العسكري. والناس يعني الناس اللي عاقلين، الناس اللي يشوف الدول اللي دخلتوا فيها عسكريا وين راها اليوم. يعني ما زال المشاكل مطروحة فيها، ما زال دول متشعبة، ما دام كذا، ما زال. شوف ليبيا، شوف سوريا. التدخل العسكري ما يحل حتى مشكل. التدخل العسكري بالأخص اليوم تأزمت الأمور فيه انضمام دولتين مجاورتين للنيجر باش تدخل في المعركة، ومن بعد نشعلوا كاع الساحل. الأمور تتحل بالمنطق.
President Tebboune emphasized further Algeria's commitment to resolving the crisis in Niger through diplomatic means. Algeria stands ready to mediate and promote a return to constitutional legitimacy in the country.
فيه انقلاب، احنا قلنا رانا مع الشرعية الدستورية ولازم يرجعوا للشرعية الدستورية. بغاونا نساعدوهم فيها ألف مرحبا. نعاونوهم بالشيء اللي يقدروا يساعدوا باش نلموا الشمل بيناتهم ألف مرحبا. باش نستعمل القوة ما نستعملش قوة أبدا. ولذا احنا قلنا ولا حل بدوننا احنا، لأن احنا المعنيين الأولين. باش تبدا تتهدد من هي وتهدد باش تضرب غلط. أنا ما نمشيش معك. الجزائر منذ استقلالنا إلى يومنا هذا عمرها ولا سيلة دم تاع جار ولا تاع أخ، باش يفهموا قطعا أن الجزائر لن تستعمل القوة مع جيرانها أبدا مهما كانت الظروف. Quel que soit le scénario au Niger, je suis sûr que les Nigériens respectent l'Algérie et n'approcheront pas les frontières algériennes.
As regards the Western Sahara issue, the Algerian president dismissed the Zionist entity's recognition of Morocco's claimed sovereignty over the occupied desert lands as meaningless and baseless. He emphasized that this action holds no significance for Algeria.
أنا بالنسبة لا حدث، لأن فاقد شيء لا يعطيه. هم بروحهم ما احتل الأراضي الفلسطينية، والآخر يعترف له كذلك باللي الأراضي الفلسطينية نتاع إسرائيل. هذه كلام فارغ. هذا فيه مشكل مطروح لازم يتحل، ويتحل على حسب القانون الدولي وعلى حساب مع الأمم المتحدة ومع مجلس الأمن.
And in a different point, Algerian president praised China as a trustworthy partner and expressed Algeria's willingness to establish joint ventures with China. He disclosed the presence of a range of collaborative projects between the two nations.
اليوم الجزائر والصين ما فيش ولا سحابة صيف بيناتهم. وعارفين باللي المشاريع التي طرحت احنا مستعدين نمول معاهم. ماشي قال روح مول لي. مستعدين نديروا شركات مختلطة، مستعدين كذا. الصينيين مثل الدول الأخرى باش ينطلق في مشروع لازم المشروع يكون مدروس، يكون دراسة دقيقة باش نعرف كيف البداية وكيف النهاية. هذا ما كان يعني ما ننطلقش أنا في ملايير الدولارات هكا يعني عاطفيا. فيه استعداد تام للصين باش تتعامل مع شريك موثوق فيه جدا.
President Tebboune confirmed that the upcoming state visit to France is still in progress and has not been cancelled. He emphasized the importance of achieving concrete outcomes during the visit, similar to the successful results achieved during his previous visits to Russia, China, Portugal, and Italy.
لحد الآن احنا ننتظر في البرنامج تاع الزيارة، نتعرف الرئاسة الفرنسية. زيارة دولة لها متطلبات، وزيارة دولة لازم تخرج بنتائج. زيارة دولة ما تكونش زيارة سياحية. هذا هو الكلام اللي كنا فيه. مازالت قايمة. لما نتفق على برنامج اللي يجسد زيارة دولة نمشي، ما فيش، ما عندناش أمور مبدئية اللي قال ما نمشي ولا ما نمشي. اللي راه يحلل من بعيد الله يخليه يحلل.
President Tebboune stated that Algeria enjoys support from China, Russia, South Africa, and Brazil, active countries in the BRICS group, towards its potential accession to the bloc. These countries are backing Algeria's inclusion in this new alliance.
الشيء اللي مشجعنا أن الفاعلين في هذا الصين، روسيا، جنوب أفريقيا، حتى البرازيل. ديلما الرئيسة السابقة تاع البرازيل اللي هي رئيسة البنك الحالي قالت الجزائر ضرورية للبريكس، لأن الجزائر منفذ لشيماء، ماهيش غير وحدها، بوابة لعدم الانحياز وعدم كذا. ثانية إذا كان تفاهموا على الأغلبية راه عندنا، أعتقد أن متفقين على أساس ممكن يعني تكون مرحلة أولى نتاع أوبسرفاتور ملاحظ. بريكس هذا هو القلب النابض نتاع عدم الانحياز. عدم الانحياز. الجزائر ماهيش منحازمة، الجزائر ما عندها قواعد أجنبية، ما هي داخلة في لوطون، ما هي داخلة في حلف عسكري آخر. ماهوش معناه بلي ما تكونش عندي صداقة مع الولايات المتحدة ولا صداقة مع روسيا ولا صداقة مع الصين ولا ديك حاجة أخرى. أما باش ننضم للتيار تاعهم في سياستهم الخارجية ما ننضمش، ندي خصومة على هذه وهذه ما خاطينا احنا.
And in the same context, Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ahmed Attaf met with ambassadors and representatives from the 5 member states of BRICS accredited to Algeria. The meetings arranged by the Algerian president aim to garner more support for Algeria's candidacy for BRICS membership. The candidacy is based on President Tebboun's strong political will and aligns with Algeria's foreign policy principles, advocating for a multipolar international system and promoting multilateral action and democratization of international relations. Minister Attaf affirmed Algeria's aspiration to contribute significantly to the bloc's objectives of regional and global peace, security, development, and prosperity. And in different news, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres conveyed his heartfelt condolences to Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune in the aftermath of the devastating fires that caused loss of life in several regions of the country. He expressed sympathy for the civilian and military victims and their families. Guterres assured President Tebboune of the United Nations' unwavering support during this challenging time. He emphasized that these fires underscore the urgent need to address the profound impacts of climate change, urging stronger international efforts to combat its root causes. To some regional news now, the Supreme Council of State in Libya elected Mohammed Takala as its new head, replacing Khaled al-Mashri, who served in the position for 5 consecutive terms. Takala's election could signal a significant political change in the lead-up to the country's elections. Notably, Takala is known for opposing the constitutional amendment and the formation of the 6+6 Joint Committee with the House of Representatives, which may impact the country's political trajectory. The United Nations confirms a dire humanitarian crisis affecting over 24 million Sudanese due to clashes between the army and the rapid support forces. Almost 4 million people have fled, facing extreme weather and constant threats, demanding immediate attention and support. The story with Salman Asib.
Fighting in Sudan between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary support forces recently passed the 100-day mark. The United Nations warns of the transformation of the humanitarian situation in the country into a multi-dimensional catastrophe, as more than 24 million people are deprived of emergency and vital humanitarian aid, including 14 million people are suffering from malnutrition. The UN also added that these enormous numbers represent half of the country's population. Meanwhile, UN humanitarian officials have called for more funding and less bureaucratic impediments to support civilians affected by the war in Sudan. For his part, Tad Shaiban, UNICEF's Deputy Executive Director for Humanitarian Action and Supply Operations, expressed his concern about the horrendous latest human crisis.
At least 435 children have been reported killed in the conflict, and at least 2,025 children injured. This is an average of one child killed or injured every hour since the war began. We know that this is an underestimate, and the true toll is likely to be far higher. I saw the consequences of the atrocities committed against children and women during the darkest days of Darfur conflict 18 years ago. I am deeply concerned that we are witnessing a repetition of these terrible days.
Between April and June, humanitarian aid reached at least 2.5 million people, underscoring the need for better financial support. As according to UN agencies, more than 20 million people across Sudan now face severe hunger, and 6 million are on the edge of famine, and nearly 4 million people have fled their homes to seek safety in Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt.
On Sunday, 3 Palestinians were killed by Zionist occupation forces in the West Bank, south of Jenin. The incident occurred when the occupation forces targeted a vehicle in the town of Araba, resulting in the deaths of 3 young men. Zionist media referred to it as a liquidation operation against a Palestinian cell, which led to the fatalities of the 3 individuals. And in other news, the Italian Coast Guard reported that 2 migrants' boats sank off the island of Lampedusa in southern Italy. They rescued 57 survivors and recovered the bodies of 2 victims. The boats, carrying a total of 48 and 42 migrants respectively, had departed from the ports of Sfax in Tunisia and sank on Saturday while en route to Europe. Among the deceased were a woman from Côte d'Ivoire and her infant. Dozens of people are still missing. To Russia-Ukraine conflict now. Saudi-hosted talks on the Ukraine conflict concluded, facing challenges due to differing countries involved. Tensions escalated as a drone targeted Moscow, leading to responses from both sides. President Zelensky emphasizes the need for a robust air defense system for Ukraine and Europe. Let's get the updates with Sofian Kenturi now.
In talks hosted by Saudi Arabia, representatives from about 40 countries discussed the war in Ukraine. But differences between the participating nations made negotiations difficult. The meeting in Jeddah ended without a written concluding statement, and with some delegations planning to hold bilateral meetings in the following day.
In total, 42 countries are represented there. Different continents, different political approaches to global affairs. But all are united by the priority of international law. And that is why Ukraine proposed the peace formula, because the rules-based international order, which was violated by Russian aggression, must be restored.
Meanwhile, there were incidents in Moscow and western Ukraine. The mayor of Moscow announced that the city's air defenses had shot down a drone targeting the capital, Vnukovo airport, and posed partial navigation restrictions in response.
Our forces thwarted an attempted drone attack by the Kiev regime in the Moscow region without any injuries or damage.
Russia also launched strikes on air bases in Khmelnytsky and Rivne regions in western Ukraine, with specific targets hit near Starokotsia, Netniev gatherings in the Rivne region. In retaliation, the Ukrainian Air Force claimed to have shot down dozens of missiles and drones, including 3 Kinjal hypersonic missiles launched by Russia. Meanwhile, President Zelensky expressed the country's effort to strengthen its air defense systems and create a reliable air shield for Ukraine and potentially all for Europe.
The occupiers hoped to destroy our aviation and our air defense in the first hours of the full-scale war, but it ended with a failure for Russia. even more. Today is the 529th day of the war, and Russia is so afraid of the defenders of our skies that it has unleashed demonstrative missile strikes a day before your professional holiday.
Overall, the talks did not yield a final statement, and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine continued to escalate, with both sides engaging in military actions.
In a message to mark the 78th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the international community to learn from the nuclear cataclysm that befell the Japanese city on 6th of August 1945. Guterres also warned that the drums of nuclear war are beating once again.
The drums of nuclear war are beating once again. Mistrust and division are on the rise. The nuclear shadow that loomed over the Cold War has re-emerged. Some countries are threatening to use these tools of annihilation.
Moving on to the climate change that hit the world recently, and especially in China and some parts of Europe. The report is signed by Zahra Fujani.
Recently, extreme weather has caused havoc across the planet, with temperatures breaking records in China, the United States and Southern Europe, sparking forest fires, water shortages and a rise in heat-related hospital admissions. According to a study by World Weather Attribution, without human-induced climate change, the events this month would have been extremely rare.
We see the fingerprint of climate change in intensifying this type of events of heat waves. So it's pretty clear, it's unequivocal that human-induced climate change is influencing heat wave events in terms of intensity and the frequency of occurrence.
The World Weather Attribution team estimated further that rising greenhouse gas concentrations made the heat wave harder than it would otherwise have been.
Currently, because of increases in greenhouse gases, and we are altering the composition of the atmosphere, affecting the global surface means the temperature, we're going to see the intensity of these events and the frequency as well being much shorter.
Besides directly impacting human health, the heat has caused large-scale crop damage and livestock losses, with US corn and soybean crops, Mexican cattle, Southern European olives, as well as Chinese cotton, all severely affected.
The agriculture impacts of extreme heat are unsettling, to say the least. I mean, extreme heat plays a role in crop die-off, right? I mean, if there's more, it's hotter temperatures are having adverse effects on crops. We are exiting the climate threshold where agriculture has grown to thrive and support civilization.
The World Weather Attribution study estimated that prolonged periods of extreme heat were likely to hit every 2 to 5 years, warning of devastating economic impacts and spurring increased migration and food shortages.
For more stories making headlines around the globe, let's turn to the news in brief now.
10 died migrants have been found on a beach in Tunisia near the city of Sfax over the past 48 hours. The dead migrants were found between Friday and Saturday during a windstorm that had possibly sunken their boat. Thousands of indigenous activists and environmentalists on Sunday have converged in one of the Amazon's biggest cities to voice their hopes and fears about the future of the world's biggest rainforest. Demonstrators gathered outside the convention center where the Amazon's dialogue were taking place. An event before the Amazon summit will start on Tuesday. A teenager riding a scooter and his adult passenger were killed after an encounter with the police in western France. On Sunday, some scuffles broke after the accident with some vehicles burned, but calm had returned by the afternoon. At least 3 people have been killed and estimated damage of more than €500 million in Slovenia after devastating floods triggered by torrential rains hit the country. According to authorities, the floods almost wiped out the town, representing an enormous loss that will cost a fortune to rebuild.
Well, we reached the end of our program. For more updates, visit our social media platforms. Thank you for watching and join us again tomorrow for more news. Take care.